Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight podcast. The Coaching and Consulting Insight series introduces you to coaches and consultants that work with leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and professionals to create their best life and achieve and perform at their full potential. Our guest today is Andrea Almaraz, co-founder of Positive Shift Partners. Now, Positive Shift Partners is a veteran-owned small business and a certified minority-owned and certified California small business. I think that may change in a little bit, but we'll see. But it is an absolute pleasure to have, and I will say this right now, my friend, Andrea Almaraz, on the show. So, Andrea, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Howard. It's so great to be here.
Yeah. Now, I don't often, well, I do sometimes. Sometimes I know my guest and we have a little bit of history, but I just remember a couple of years ago, you were just, Howard, if you saw my badge, I know you. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I would love if you could, introduce for our audience, who is Andrea Almaraz?
Okay, so I'm an organization development expert, and I can't even believe I'm saying this. I have over 25 years experience doing this, and I've worked both in corporate and with small businesses, helping business leaders and their teams to have strong, thriving teams. It's been a journey and it's looked different in different phases of my career, but the heart of it is always that people are our most valuable asset. And what are we doing to make them successful? And that's what I do. Early in my career, I got the chance to be part of the founding team of the Ameritech Institute, which doesn't even exist anymore.
Ameritech, that's, if I recall, that's the phone company.
It is the phone company.
Oh,
and these days they're back to being AT&T.
Oh boy.
And they've gone through many different iterations, but at the time they were going through a big transition, going from Illinois Bell, Michigan Bell, Wisconsin Bell, and they were rebranding as Ameritech. And they had founded this Ameritech Institute to help with the culture change they were going through. And the thing that made this exciting for me, fresh out of college, but it was a time where really there was a change in how you looked at leadership and leadership development, from being a top-down exercise to being more of a bottoms-up movement. And the thing that made Ameritech Institute different was that they went all in on that your frontline leaders were the ones who could drive change versus it being dictated from the CEO. And we took both approaches, but as much attention was put on the front line as there was on the top leadership of the company. And that was huge for me to be working with the top consultants of the time, investing that heavily on leaders at all levels of the organization. And it really it's my foundation that every person, no matter their role, makes a difference.
I love that. And you kind of dated yourself a little bit. I'm thinking, my God, I thought, Andrea, you were like 30 years old. Not even 30, but but Ameritech.
Yeah. Time keeps going.
Yes, it does. It goes faster, I think, as we get older. So I have a couple of questions, just kind of circling back and unpacking what you shared just a little more. Was your first opportunity or job with Ameritech out of undergrad or did you go back to graduate school?
It was out of undergrad, actually.
Oh, wow.
And I was one of the younger people on that team.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, it's my first job. I was a worker bee, but I'm grateful because I got to be a part of it all. I was, part of the team to help make it all work. I was a support person, but it was great. I got to see so much. And from there, I got recruited to another telecom company, doing more process improvement, change management work, more responsibility. And then I transitioned. So I did that type of work for 7-8 years.
Okay.
And then I transitioned to being an independent contractor.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about that in a second, but I'm curious, when you were with Ameritech and then the next telecom company, you were fresh out of college.
Yep.
What was it like with other OD professionals who, like you just shared, they're a little bit older than you are. You were the
Yep.
young kid, you were the worker bee. What was it like for them to shift their mindset as companies like Ameritech, perhaps this other telecom company, were shifting their focus to be more from a top down to an inclusive culture? I'm curious about
Right.
that.
I would say they were instrumental in recognizing and teaching it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was. I remember, especially at Ameritech, and it felt like every month I would look at Fortune magazine or whatever the latest business magazine was that was hitting it, and I would say, "Oh, that person was just here talking to us. Oh, like I can't believe it! Like we were just listening to this person." I mean, there was just there was a fresh perspective on what leadership development and what change management meant inside of a company, and it was getting a lot of press. And I think the CEO of Ameritech at the time just was very, visionary. It was bringing in these thought leaders to help their team also move through this change of how to see things. But there's a lot of, top-down management can be very comfortable
Yes.
because you do what you're told. It alleviates a whole bunch of responsibility. And when you're in a big organization with 50, 60,000 employees, there is a certain need for some structure to keep
Right.
the machine going. But when you really want to make some changes and you want the process to work better and maybe more efficiently, and you want to increase customer service, it can't just be, you cannot dictate good customer service. People have to understand that it's a core value. They have to feel empowered to be able to give good customer service.
Mhm.
And then you just have to think about leadership in a different way, and you have to empower the people who are actually talking to customers. Yeah.
Remind
And
me to
it's a big deal. Yeah.
Remind me to ask you about this point that you're making, because we're going to introduce your husband in just a second. He's not on camera, but he's behind the scenes somewhere. But Renee is former military. That is very much a top-down culture. And I will be curious when we talk more about Positive Shift Partners, how that experience plays into the work that you're doing coming
Right.
from
Right.
that kind of
It-
culture. So I'm curious about that. Don't
okay.
answer it just
We'll
yet.
hold that thought for a second.
So as you and I are chatting, you and I both know Andrea J. Lee, and it's her pops of the light bulbs going off in my head as you and I are chatting here. Now, you were a student at DePaul University in Chicago.
That I've got my graduate degree there.
That's your graduate degree there. And the second telecom company, was that moving out of Chicago, or is that in
Yep.
Chicago?
That was, then the second telecom, I moved to the Denver area.
Oh my.
And before Denver grew up so much.
Yeah.
And loved it. And then ended up moving back to Chicago though. And Chicago was home. So
Of course.
transitioned back a few years later.
You and I share a friend. We have a friend in common, Judith DeVries, and I knew her when she was director or coaching director at the time Challenger Grand Christmas. And I remember it for our listeners. I mean, Andrea and I met at an event, and we're going to talk about this in just a moment. And
I know
all
our
this,
whole story is like, it's a small world.
yeah, it's a very small world. I get a Facebook message, Howard, you know a friend of mine that's at this event, because I was sharing, hey, look where I'm at, folks. And then that's how we met. But how did you meet Judith?
Well, Judith is a dear family friend, and
Okay.
we went to church together, but
Okay.
we also she was also at DePaul University, the same graduate program as I. So she introduced that program to me and was
Okay.
instrumental in me picking DePaul.
She has that way
And
with people. She's very instrumental in the way
she's a
she
superstar. Yeah.
provides insights, and not advice, because coaches don't give advice, but insights. Very good. Very
Yeah.
good. So you got to Denver, worked for another telecom company, and then came back to Chicago. When did this insight that you're going to leave corporate America with a very, to a certain extent, safe job? Now, realize there's recessions that come into play, and all of a sudden we have to make hard decisions. But when did you decide that I'm going to go off and hang a shingle on my own?
Well, ironically, it's actually a pretty long journey for me. Like
Okay.
I flirted with being an entrepreneur early on. But it happened kind of by accident. I wasn't really looking to go out on my own, but I got this opportunity and it just seemed too good to pass up. And they were looking for a consultant. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. I was doing work that I had been doing for the last several years. And so I said, yes, but this is where mindset is such a powerful thing, right? Because I didn't really recognize that I was starting my own business at that time.
Okay.
I was just saying yes to this opportunity. It happened to be an independent contractor kind of position. But something happened. It kept going. And I got an extension of this project and I got a new project. And 7, 8 years later, I was still doing it. And I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. But then it happened. You
Right.
teased it, right? And my whole world kind of went through a massive upheaval. And in fact, the whole organization development industry went through a pretty big upheaval because there was a massive contraction in the economy. OD work, it is overhead, and it's seen as overhead in big businesses.
Unfortunately, it's seen as overhead.
Right. I mean, and it's one of the first, but when you're trying to protect your core business, it's one of the first things that you let go of, particularly people who are not on your payroll.
Right.
And so most of my projects disappeared pretty much within a very short amount of time. And so I had to really relook at things. And I went through a bunch of life changes at this time. I moved to California. I met my now husband, and it caused me to just like relook at things. And this is where our story starts to intersect because
Sure.
I found Lisa Sasvich and
Okay.
I joined her team. I was her very first employee.
I heard that.
And it was the beginning of kind of reinventing what I do. But I helped her grow her business from right around the 2.2 million mark to a $6 million business with a core team of 12 to 15 people, depending on the year.
Right.
And we were together for, about 10 years,
Wow. What?
And during that time, not only did we build up a team that ran a sustainable business, but we also helped other entrepreneurs with growing their business. It was an extremely fulfilling chapter.
Sure. Yeah. Enter Howard Fox there.
Yeah.
I got a quick question. Again, I want to circle back just a little bit and do some unpacking. When you came into the orbit with Lisa Sasevich, did she find you or did you find her?
We found each other through Craigslist.
Really? Craigslist.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because I was in San Diego at the time.
I feel
and
bad for you there, by the way.
Yeah,
I feel very bad for you.
But I had been doing all this work driven by corporate headquarters. And you know what? San Diego does not have a lot of corporate headquarters.
No.
A little bit more right now, and then it did not. And there was very little work that looked similar to what I had been doing. And one day I woke up and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to find something today. And I was like, let me just pop into Craigslist. I don't know why, but I did. And do you know that not 48 hours later, I was working with Lisa.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was a crazy story. I really believe it was meant to be. They had already thought they found somebody for this role, but then at the last minute, she wasn't sure if it was really the right person. So they decided to hire, to interview one more person. That was me.
Right.
I happened to submit my resume on that day. It was just like, it was just divine. It meant to be.
Having met Lisa a number of times, I mean, obviously I don't know her not anywhere as well as you do, but what I take from Lisa, she's the type of person who will say, I need to sit and sleep on it, pray on it, think about it, go watch the sunset. And I'm sure she really did that before she came back to you and said, Andrea, I would love for you to join our team.
Yeah. And the thing about that is that I showed up and I'm in a suit and dressed up in heels and stuff. She was in her workout gear. We were sitting in, the living room of her house at the time. And I was a little rattled because I'm like, oh, okay, not quite. I mean, I knew she worked from home and stuff, but it just wasn't quite what I was expecting.
Right.
And I think we both went home and kind of sat and like, okay, what's here? But the thing is, like, I knew she was looking for a partner and I knew I could be a good partner.
Okay.
And it worked out. And,
That's great. And I know, the 10 years or so, I mean, again, we are barely going to touch the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. As you look back on your career with Lisa, what are your takeaways, your growth moments, like the wow moments? And in our episode,
yeah.
always ask insights to go or aha moments. And those aren't it, by the way. Those are not it. But looking
I'll tell
back,
you,
what was it?
I'm a student of organization development and adult leadership. I've studied it my whole life. I've worked in it. I feel like I'm a lifelong learner about it. You never stop learning about it.
Right.
And there's a thing that happens when there are natural organizational clusters. One that happens when you're 1 to 3 employees. The next one happens when you're at 8 to 12 employees. Then the next grouping is like 40 to 70. So there's a pretty big gap. And then it goes from there. And it's one thing to study it and like read articles about it and the psychology of it and what happens with your processes. And it's another thing to live through it. And we lived through it. We lived through with Lisa. We grew past 3 people and went through the growing pains of that. We grew past 12 people and the growing pains that come with that because things happen organizationally. The things that worked for you when you're 3 people don't work when you have 10 people. They don't even work when you have 6 people. You can stretch them, but they're not, everything feels a little harder. You feel a little bit stuck. You have this thing that like, oh, I'm big, but I'm not big enough. And all that is because you're kind of between these 2 natural, like organizational clusters that happen. It's, I don't know why it happens. It just is the way human nature and the way processes work. But you go through natural growing pains in between. And I got to go through those with her and we solved them together. And it was an incredible journey,
I can imagine. And as you began to pre-contemplate the moving away from what you have co-created with Lisa in beautiful San Diego. Still can't believe you moved from San Diego, but it's neither here nor there. Yeah. What, number one, Andrea, what was the big, if there is one, I'm sure there's many takeaways that you have carried away from that experience with Lisa and now moving across country with Renee to start your business Positive Shift Partners? What are some of those really substantive takeaways that you're bringing with you?
Well, I can remember just sitting in the back of a room with a session that I was helping to run and she was teaching and I was like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. Like I just hadn't really thought of myself and the work that I had been doing that way. And when I had that recognition, you can't unthink it. You just can't. And so that seed just kept growing. And I was like, oh, I want to do this. I want to help entrepreneurs with their growing teams and show them how it can go better, how hiring can be easier, how communications can get better, and what kind of structures you need in place to meet your growing team and the simple changes that can happen and should happen when you go past 3 people, when everybody knows everything. And so I was like, okay, I wasn't sure when it was going to happen, but I knew it was going to happen. And ironically, in 2020, I guess, in 2019, we made the decision. And then in 2020, I hung out my shingle 3 weeks before, the pandemic shut down the country. So I was a little like, I was like, oh, even that ended up being a blessing.
Sure. I was And we both chatted that we have a number of folks in common, and we'll just shout out everybody we know.
I know
Well,
all these people we love.
yeah, I mean, Doug Pointer, who is now in Richmond, Virginia, where you're at, he and I were exchanging text messages on LinkedIn. And he says, hey, there's this opportunity out in Las Vegas when he coaches. And this was like February of 2020. Okay. So I totally get that. And I had wanted to move out to San Diego. Andre, every time you go to San Diego or Santa Barbara for that matter, where I went to
Oh,
grad
I
school,
know.
it's like, I want to be here. I have to be here. And I'm sitting cold and freezing in Chicago in February. And there's this opportunity to go to Las Vegas. And I'm like, what do I
Yep.
have to do? So
Yep.
you kind of, you get that moment like, wow, I need to take this jump, this leap. Or what's that? I love that slide that's always shared in the boot camps or in the workshops where the trapeze artists,
Right.
you
Right.
gotta
You
be
got to let
willing to
go
let
of
go.
one in order to get to the other side.
I love that. I love that. So with Renee, had you met out in San Diego or did
We
you know each
met.
other beforehand?
No, we met in the Midwest,
Okay.
but he's from San Diego, so that he
Okay.
is the reason why we ended up there.
I feel so sorry for this guy. So you guys met. When did this idea of starting Positive Shift Partners, when did that begin to take seed?
Yeah, we had this realization that he spent most of his life in contract management and program management, and a lot of that is it's also managing people,
Right.
managing change, being smart about how people impact your processes. We had a lot more overlap than we really gave credit for. And whether you're doing it in a big business setting or in a small business setting, people are people, and you empower people or you disempower people the same way, whether it's a big team or a small team. And you make processes that work the same as whether it's a big team or a small team. It can be a little more complex in a bigger organization, but the core things that make it work are the same. And so we were like, we should team up,
Okay.
and so that's how,
I love that. Now,
yeah.
I am curious. I want to circle back to a comment I made earlier because Renee is former military. I look at military to a certain extent. I could be wrong. I have a feeling you're going to say, well, Howard, you are wrong. Or he will say that to me. Is I think of military, it to a certain extent, is being very top down. And
Yeah.
how does that integrate with a people inclusive culture, especially with his background and what you're doing now?
For sure that the military has that reputation, and there's a lot of truth to it, right? Because of the need to have clear direction on the battlefield, I guess, right? But I also know, and this is kind of one of those yes and kind of answers,
Okay.
that the military has been incredibly progressive about bringing people in and trying to look at leadership in a different way, and to meet the challenges of that they have, which are big, and they know that the only way you can meet those challenges is through people. Like, there isn't a process that you can implement that will fix the challenges that they have. So I'm not the best person to talk about it. I don't have a military background, but I think that in many ways the military still tries to lead in this area, right?
Okay.
They're willing to invest and look at and bring different experts in.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, you both made the decision to
And
move
I'm sure
across
there's
country.
somebody out there listening who knows so much more about this than me. I just
You know,
so reach out, let me know.
so here's my invitation, Renee. I know Andrea is going to share this podcast episode with you. She's going to go, look, honey, look what I just did. So feel free to comment back and share more about this. And that way the rest of the universe will have, the value that Andrea is bringing to not only her bringing to the table, but now we're going to have your insight as well. All right. I
Yep.
did the call out for us, Andrea. Yeah, you decided to make this trip out to Richmond, and I have no doubt you're going to find clients everywhere, anywhere.
I've had some really fun milestones in the last couple of years.
Well,
Like,
that's what I want to know is
so my clients are international. you
Yes.
know, and location doesn't matter so much.
It does. I totally agree. It does not. Who are your ideal clients?
So my ideal clients are growing business owner leaders with growing businesses with a team between 4 and usually 12 to 15 team members.
Okay.
And that there's a real reason for that, right? Because when you're growing and you're starting to add team, the thing that the things that you used to do as a solopreneur or even with 1 or 2 people stop working over time.
Right.
When you're a solopreneur, and then even when you have your first 1 or 2 people, you're in this mode where everybody knows everything, right? Because you're all in it together. There's no task too small or too big. You all tackle it together, and it's appropriate. And that is how you grow. And then that gets that gets you more success, right? And then you need more team. And the things that you've been doing all along to make yourself so successful start to break. And
Okay.
they usually start breaking right around 4 to 5 employees.
Okay. That's
So
good to know.
that is where my ideal client comes into play, because they usually come to me because something isn't working.
Okay.
We have a position they've been trying to hire for, and it just never seems to work out, and they can't
Mhm.
figure out why. Or the team is like stretched to, like, they're just like this whole feeling of we're big but not big enough, and
Right.
we're too busy and we're dying under the responsibility. I'm the bottleneck for everything, and nothing moves forward unless it comes to me. Or the leader just feels like they're stuck in everything. That's another trigger to come
Okay.
to me. And I have different things that I do
Okay.
that help people move through that point.
Okay. I actually want to talk about that, but I do have one quick question. So we know the ideal size, 4 to 12 to 15. Is there a particular industry or type of business? Is it an entrepreneurial business, a brick and
I
mortar? What is
I
it?
right. I have worked with a lot of different types of businesses.
Yeah.
So the team is team. It
Okay.
does not matter. I have worked with janitorial services. I have worked with legal teams. I have worked with all kinds of online businesses, service-based businesses
Yeah.
that are online with virtual teams, all positions virtual. I would say that is my most common client, and that is for sure virtue of where I spent the last 10 years of my, career. But I worked with all kinds of teams.
Okay. Okay. So I want to circle very
I do
briefly
want to
back.
say though, like,
What's that?
but you have to be willing to lean in,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because invariably it calls for some sort of change, and change does not happen unless you really choose it. You know.
Right.
Okay. So I just
Sometimes it,
had to say that.
I appreciate sometimes it chooses you, whether you liked it or not. But I love that you shared that. And as you are working with the client, are there some telltale signs or a roadmap they should be thinking about as they are embarking on this change
Yeah.
initiative, whatever it looks like?
Right. Yeah. I've been talking to people a lot about what does it mean to have a people plan,
Yeah.
especially right now, because everybody's talking about the great resignation. I call it the great quit. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's kind of in this moment where we've come through a very difficult couple of years. We have a lot of anxiety. We're not really sure what the next couple of years are going to look like. And it makes you really take stock and evaluate, is like, am I in the right place? And in that moment, a lot of people are choosing to leave their current situation for a whole variety of reasons. And I have clients who have come to me when, they've all of a sudden have big gaps, and now they're trying to solve them. So I've been talking more and more about what does it mean to have a people plan. We,
Okay.
as business owners, talk a lot about having a strategic business plan,
Hmm.
having an annual plan. But I'd like to talk about having a people plan, because as much as we invest in a strategic plan, like, if we don't pay attention to the people part, like when your strategic plan works and you having your biggest successes, those same successes put extra pressure on your people. And if you don't have a people plan and you're not looking at that situation holistically, you can have your biggest breakdowns right when you're celebrating your biggest successes.
Okay.
And so I've talked to business owners about, you know, the steps that you can take to have a holistic people plan. And it's hiring, it's succession planning, it's integrating into your annual plan. It's a bunch of different things. And you can just take them one step at a time.
Okay.
You don't have to do it all. It's just one step at a time, But the thing is that really cool about it is that once you start doing this, you are doing a lot of the thinking proactively, so that whether you choose a change on your team or the change chooses you, now you've already thought about it. You have a base to make a better decision more quickly because you've done some thinking about what does it mean and how is work getting done on my team.
Okay.
So sorry, I just get passionate about it.
I know you do. I know you do. And it's something we're not even going to edit any of the passion out. It's all in. I am curious though, with the people plan and from one entrepreneur to the next, I'm not even going to edit that out.
No, I trip on that word too.
There you go. I've got a lot of words I trip on. Trust me on that one. As one entrepreneur to the next, we lived in the world of, what do you call it? The lead magnets. So if somebody wanted to get to know Positive Shift Partners and they visit your website, are there some things that are available, items, collateral available to them, the visitor, to get them interested? Like, wow, these guys are speaking my language here.
Yeah, for sure. I have a people plan roadmap. So, and it's like a mini booklet kind of thing that you can download, and it breaks down the key components, people plan, and why they're important. And then I also include a little checklist in there so that you can kind of start thinking through, oh, these are the different things that I can start tackling.
Okay. Now, we'll definitely provide the backlink, to the website where the visitors can pick up the people plan. So no doubt about that. Before we let you go, Andrea, I know you're busy. I mean, for our listeners, she and Renee just literally moved out to Richmond, Virginia. They left San Diego. Can you believe that? But it
We're
is
closer
what it
to
is.
family, though. So
You're
it's
closer to family. I know that. However, before we let you go, because I know you have a lot of stuff to do, what type of aha moment do you have as you look back in your career? Because you've accomplished a lot. I mean, you're in Chicago, starting off in telecom and moved to Denver, back to Chicago, moved to San Diego. Now you're in Richmond. So you've been on a couple rodeos. Okay. As you look back in your career, any aha moment for you and what you have accomplished?
I think it's that moment when you realize, oh, I too am an entrepreneur.
Okay.
That moment was it's pretty profound for me. My grandpa was an entrepreneur. I come from a family full of mission-driven people who have made a big impact in this world. And then I was the business major. I was kind of like the black sheep. I went into corporate. And that was such a big part of my identity as a young person. And the farther and more I went into my career and the more down this life journey, I realized like, I wanted to do it my way. And
I get that.
yeah. And then I realized looking back that all these steps were leading me to be an entrepreneur. And then I was actually even an entrepreneur before I even recognized it. I had been on my own independent contracting work for almost 8 years. I don't know. I just hadn't realized that was me too,
Okay.
and it's kind of one of those, like, if you knew then what you know now, but then I might have missed something else. And so
Right.
I don't regret one step of the journey. It's all been really great,
I
but
hear you.
I love being an entrepreneur, and I love helping entrepreneurs. I think that it's a foundational part of our economy. And I think we're making a big, big difference in this
Sure.
country and in the world. And I love being a part of it.
Most definitely that. Now, again, before we let you go, Any final, what we call it, insight to go that you would like to share with our listeners about this journey? And you're kind of alluding to it in the aha moment, but any
Oh, yeah.
insight that you want to leave for them?
If you're out there and you love what you do and you have a team and all of a sudden you're like, oh, what have I done? Like, can I do this? I promise you, you can. It's a natural step. It's a natural growth process to go through. You can get through it, and don't worry, go get help, whether it's from me, from somebody else. It's just one of those things that all the things that we do as solopreneurs to make ourselves successful, and then it works. Those those aren't the things that make you successful with your team. But recognition is half the battle, right? So what's the saying? Once more you do more and you do better.
Right.
It's the same thing. And it can be as simple as that. You don't have to overcomplicate it.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for that. Now, before we let you go, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
Please, the two places to find me the most easily, positiveshiftpartners.com and find me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And we will provide, of course, the backlinks to Positive Shift Partners, where they will also be able to pick up a
Absolutely.
copy of the People Plan Roadmap, and we'll provide a backlink to your LinkedIn profile as well. Andrea, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you, because I don't think we've really ever had this kind of a chat before. And that's the beauty of the podcast, is it's like having a conversation with a friend that you haven't seen in 15 years. And in our case, maybe about 5, but it's been a pleasure to catch up with you.
It's so much fun.
Excellent. Well, listen, stay on the line. We're going to do a quick close, and you and I can have a final chat. Okay.
Perfect.
All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Andrea Almaraz, co-founder with her husband, Renee, of Positive Shift Partners. Positive Shift Partners is a veteran-owned small business and certified minority-owned and certified California small business, but I'm sure they're going to be certified a lot of other places. But the beauty of this conversation with Andrea is, yes, I met her at an entrepreneurial event hosted by Lisa Sasevich, the queen of I think the queen of the invisible clothes. I hope I got that right. But what's really important here is Andrea's journey going into a university and coming out with this degree in organization development, and really getting her feet wet in working in companies and telecom, and then slowly gathering up all the tools she needed to go on this entrepreneurial journey, and really, and also taking advantage of the people that have crossed her paths as well, her managers, friends. We just mentioned Judith, and just the opportunity, and ultimately getting to San Diego. I still can't believe she left, but I digress. But really, now she's out there working with entrepreneurs, small business owners that are looking to not only grow their business, but to be successful and to work on the people element of the equation. Because if you work with the people, you take care of them, they're going to take care of you. And as I say with my LinkedIn practice, your people are your brand ambassadors. You need to care about what they say about themselves, but also about the company. But if you're taking care of them, you truly are creating wonderful brand ambassadors. Now, as far as Andrea, do go out and visit their website at positiveshiftpartners.com. The roadmap will be there as well. And do connect with Andrea on her LinkedIn profile. And again, we're going to provide all the backlinks. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode on the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight podcast, we want to hear from you. So you can visit us on successinsightpodcast.com and leave a comment. In fact, share the episode with a friend, a family member, whoever. You can also find us on our Facebook and LinkedIn pages, and we are on all of the podcast directories. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. Take care of yourselves, your family, and we will see you on a future episode of the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.